The 19-year-old man accused of opening fire inside a Poway synagogue has pleaded not guilty to federal hate crimes and other charges. News 8's Steve Price is live downtown tonight, where the alleged gunman was arraigned today. Steve?
And Barbara Lee, joining him in court today, his parents, who left the courthouse avoiding reporters on their way out, but their son is now officially facing even more charges. The alleged shooter walked into a federal courtroom Tuesday with a stern look on his face and allowed the judge to enter a not guilty plea on his behalf. Since cameras are not allowed in federal court, this is John Ernest from an earlier arraignment in Superior Court. His hair was shorter today with his hands and legs in shackles.
These crimes were explicitly motivated by hatred toward the Jewish and Muslim communities.
The 19-year-old is accused of opening fire inside the Chabad of Poway last month, killing worshiper Lori Kay and injuring the rabbi, along with a young girl and her uncle. The accused shooter called 911 on himself.
Quote, "I just shot up a synagogue. I'm just trying to defend my nation against the Jewish people."
He is also charged with an arson fire in March at a mosque in Escondido.
In that case, portions of the mosque's exterior wall were charred after the defendant used gasoline as an accelerant and scrawled references to the New Zealand shooter.
An indictment from a federal grand jury has added more charges against the alleged shooter. Today, he was arraigned on 113 counts, 54 counts of obstruction of free exercise of religious beliefs using a dangerous weapon, 54 counts of violating the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, 1 count of damaging religious property, and 4 charges for discharging a firearm during crimes of violence. If convicted on all charges, the alleged shooter is eligible for the death penalty.
We will not allow our community members to be hunted in their houses of worship.
The 19-year-old will be back in federal court June 24th to set a trial date. And while the federal case is making its way through the courthouse here directly across the street, he faces even more charges in Superior Court. In fact, Carlo and Barbara Lee, he is expected to be in court there again on Thursday.